Welcome to My Life Chassidus Applied, episode 446. This program is a merit of Baruch Binyamin ben Menucha Lana and Miriam Bas Chaya Sar Altes, Yukasil ben Leah Rochel and Rochel Bas Liba Farkas, dedicated by Pinchas Todres ben Miriam and Sarah Bas Rochel Altes. Today is Beis Iyar, the second day of the month of Iyar, the 189th anniversary of the birth of the Rebbe Maharash, the fourth Chabad Rebbe. He was the seventh son of the Tzemach Tzedek, the youngest son, and he was born on this date, the year Tohu Kuf Tzadik Daled, which corresponds to 1894. So let's begin with the most obvious question of all. Why was he named Shmuel? As someone writes, who was the Rebbe Maharash named for if there was no ancestors in the family named Shmuel? So there's a story. On the day of the bris of the Rebbe Maharash, so the bris usually you do in the morning, but the Tzemach Tzedek did not come out to the bris yet, so it was delayed on that very day. They're waiting and waiting. Then in the afternoon, the Tzemach Tzedek came out, and he was heard saying, "I, the Acharei Kedoshim in Plotsk." And then the bris happened, and the Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek said to name him Shmuel. When Chassidim asked, who is he named after? So Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek said, he's named after a water carrier in Polotsk. When they checked out what had happened and why it took time for the bris to take place, so they checked out that day, that morning in Polotsk, two people passed away. One was a Chof, a distinguished individual, and the other was the water carrier. The Acharei Kedoshim first dealt with the distinguished one. They buried him. And then when they finally got to the water carrier in the Polotsk, it was already in the afternoon. And being that you don't name someone after another person till after they're interred, till after they're buried, the Tzemach Tzedek waited. But I was not able to find out why Dafka, this person, was zeicher that the Rebbe Maharash should be named after him. So if anyone has more information on that, please, by all means. What we do derive from this, what we take away from this is that sometimes Taka Rebbe is named after another great Rebbe, a grandfather, a great-grandfather, a great person, and sometimes it may not be someone that seems great in Giluyim, on a revelatory level, but that doesn't mean the person isn't great. And for some reason, this person was zeicher. I don't want to read more into it because I have not heard explanation. As again, that doesn't mean there isn't one. I looked around, but there's always possibility, there's a story, a sikha somewhere that talks about this some more. So, as usual in this program, as I like to believe that this is a partnership, My Life Chassidus Applied, we're looking, all of us together, to figure out how to apply Chassidus to our personal lives, which is the whole purpose of Chassidus, is to bring it into our, integrate it and internalize it. So let's do this together. If anyone has any sources or any information on this, please share it with me. Go to chassidusapply.com. There's a forum there, firstly, where you could ask any question completely anonymously, but that doesn't mean you have to be anonymous. In this case, if you could still be anonymous. In this case, if you'd like, you could also leave your email address. I actually prefer that people write anonymously, so then the questions can be asked without any hesitation. There are no taboos, no concerns of exposure, so to speak. But this doesn't mean if you want to write your email address, you want us to stay in contact with you, please do so. So this is a good opportunity to announce. chassidusapply.com is a robust website dedicated to this program and to many other resources of Chassidus. Should also mention there are other classes that I give once a day, every week. I give every weekday a class in Beis, which is a live class every morning in New York time, 9:30 a.m. On Sundays it's 10 a.m. And you go to chassidusapply.com, you can see all the information how to join that. Okay, back to Beis Iyar. So that's the story. Now we also know Beis as Tiferes Shebet Tiferes. What is the significance of the Rebbe Maharash being born in Tiferes Shebet Tiferes? And is there a correlation to the central theme of his leadership, which was Lechatchila Ariber? Okay. So there's another story. A few years later, when the Rebbe Maharash was in Cheder, was learning with his teacher, with his Rebbe, with his Malamed. So his Malamed was Nispal, was very excited and very impressed by the Rebbe Maharash's aptitude and his success in his learning. And when he mentioned something to Tzemach Tzedek, his father, the Rebbe Maharash's father, Tzemach Tzedek said, "What's this Pilas? Tiferes Shebet Tiferes." What is the excitement that they're talking about someone that was born Tiferes Shebet Tiferes? So we know Chassidus Tiferes is the third midah, the third sfira, which corresponds to the third week of Sfiras Ha'emer. Tiferes Shebet Tiferes is the third within the third. Now Tiferes is a unique midah. It's a unique sfira. It's the kavam tzoi. It's called the middle path. And the language of Chassidus, based on the posuk about the Mishkan, it says Tiferes is the bria chatichen, the middle rod, hamavriach min hakotza lakotza, that extends and runs from one end to the other. The Mishkan, when they attached the walls, so there were brichim that attached one wall to the next, but to create an equilibrium, like a spine, so to speak, in the human body, there was one bria chatichen that ran across all the walls, that created that steadiness of all the walls being consistent. So in Ruchnius, what this is, Tiferes the kavam tzoi. Chesed is the right side. Gvura is the left side. Same thing, Chachmem being the right and left. Tiferes is the kavam tzoi, like the spine, that runs up to Das, and all the way up to Tiferes Eila ad HaKeser. Goes all the way up to Keser. And also down to Yesod and Malchus. So in that sense, Tiferes is rooted in a place that's even higher than all the other spheres. What does that mean in Aveda, in our personal service? Tiferes refers to Rachamim, compassion. Chesed says, be kind. Gvura comes and can challenge that and said, 1 second, this person may not deserve to be kind to. He did something wrong. And Tiferes listens to both and says, it may be that you're right, Gvura, but we have a thing called compassion. Compassion overrides Gvura. And therefore, compassion, Midas Harachim, we say, Yud Gimel Midas Harachim, the 13 divine attributes of compassion, what God revealed to Moshe when he was on Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, begging for the Jews. And finally, Yom Kippur was granted, the day of forgiveness. Yom Kippur, Yom HaKippurim. That's the power of Tiferes, that was able to reach to the deepest levels, all the way to the highest levels in Keser. I remember beautiful Sikha connected to the Rebbe Maharash. So it was on Yud Gimel Tishrei Tovshin Mem. Gimel Tishrei is the Rebbe Maharash's yahrzeit. So on Tovshin Mem, it's a very powerful farbrengen. Among many things, a lot of Giluyim, interesting farbrengen to listen to. It's on recording, so worthwhile listening to. So many different aspects of it. But I want to point out one. The Rebbe told a story, a Sikha from the Frierdiker Rebbe, where he talks about that the Rebbe Maharash was once speaking and talking about the Rabbeim, and he said that the Rabbeim correspond to the Spheres. He said the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid is Keser, Atik and Arich. The two levels in Keser, which is the transcendent level in the spheres. Keser, like the crown. The Alter Rebbe is Choch. The Mittler Rebbe is Bin. The Tate, meaning the Tzemach Tzedek, is Das. And then he concluded and said, "Un Ister, davon vorn zum Tat, nun Herren was tutzach." And now we have to travel to my father, and hear what's happening. And he went to the oil. His father was in the oil. So the Rebbe asked the question, what's the connection? First he speaks about the spheres, about his father, and then he says, now we have to go to my father. So the Rebbe said, because the Tzemach Tzedek is Das. Das is also the middle path. And Das is Eila Hadar Keser. If you want to know what's Tutzach, what's really happening behind the scenes, you need to go to Keser. So you need to travel to Das, to my father, to find out what's going on in Keser, in the hidden worlds of what's happening behind the scenes. Now the Frierdiker Rebbe in that Sikha continues, and we know that the next generation is the Rebbe Maharash is, in this context, actually Netzach. The Rebbe Rashab Hoid, Frierdiker Rebbe Yesod, Yosef, and the Rebbe, as we know, Malchus. Which of course begs the question, you just said that Rebbe Maharash is Tiferes Shabbat Tiferes, how does that stem with the fact that he's Netzach? So that's for another time, a good question. I've not seen it asked, but it's an interesting thing to point out. But regardless, he's the sphere of Netzach as a Rebbe, but he was born Tiferes Shabbat Tiferes. So the point I wanted to make is that Tiferes has the special connection to Das, which is also interesting that the Rabbeim, when you talk to Rebbe Maharash, we skip Chesed Gvura Tiferes. It jumps straight from Das to Netzach. Now we know Netzach, Chayd Yesod is like our branches of Chesed Gvura Tiferes. They're the more behavioral aspect of those emotions. But still, why Dafka Netzach, Chayd Yesod and not Chesed Gvura Tiferes? And perhaps that's also connected to the discussion that needs to be had. So I'm pointing more questions. I'm emphasizing more questions than answers, but it's for another time. But it's just interesting to note. So Tiferes Shabbat Tiferes is the point we want to make. And yes, of course it's connected, and the Rebbe, I believe, connects it in a number of sikhs to Lechatchila Ariber. So let's talk about Lechatchila Ariber. Lechatchila Ariber, for the record, is based on an expression from the Rebbe Maharash. The Rebbe Maharash famously said, the Welt sagt, the world says, that when you're faced with an obstacle, if you're faced with an obstacle, first you try to go below, meaning get below the radar, so to speak, below the obstacle. And if you can't, then we go above, we leap above. When ich sag, the Maharash says, I say, that we initially, the first step we leap above. This was an expression that Rebbe Maharash used. The Rebbe was actually that coined it as being the muhus, the personality of the Rebbe Maharash. That his whole nesius, his leadership was on that level. Whereas the Tzemach Tzedek, for example, lived more meager ways. Any gifts he received, he gave to the Rebbe Maharash. The Rebbe Maharash lived much more b'harchava, more expansively. Not, God forbid, in a material way, because he was the Chatchila Ariber. Chatchila Ariber is a particular approach, which means that usually you go with a certain measure, with certain calculations. But then there's an approach to Chatchila Ariber that you leap over and you take an attitude that you don't even consider the obstacle in the first place. The first approach, what the world says, Eilom, Meloshin, Helen, Vehester, as the Rebbe says, from the world expression of concealment, it's always calculating and trying to figure out a method how to deal with an obstacle. And he says, no obstacle. Which the Rebbe used so often also in expressions to people, you should go Lechatchila Ariber, which of course consistent with Tiferes Shabbat Tiferes, because Tiferes goes all the way at Ariber. It crosses through Chesed Gvura, through Chachma Bina, goes straight to Chesed, because it's the Kavam Tzoi. And Tiferes Shabbat Tiferes is in Tiferes itself, the essence of Tiferes, which is also why Tiferes is the third path, the middle path, because it's also beauty, which is the harmony within diversity. Tiferes also means beauty. So whereas Chesed would be associated, let's say, with the color blue, or whitish blue, like water, and Gvura with the color red, like fire. So Tiferes creates beauty, it's the harmony, many colors together. Beauty is always never one color, never one hue, never one musical note. It always takes many different things and shows how they all connect to something greater. So it's like a synergetic effect. And that too is connected to the Chatchila Ariber, Tiferes going straight to the core. In our lives, it means there are things we do that are measured, that we have to consider, we have to negotiate, we have to deal with whatever factors are around us, and that's important. But there are times where an obstacle has to simply be ignored, an obstacle that stops us from reaching our potential, an obstacle that really weakens our resolve. So Chatchila Ariber is not being reckless, God forbid. It's not being frivolous. It means it's an approach where you know that God is with you, and that when you take upon yourself an important resolution, sometimes you just need that thing to forge ahead and just move all the way to the point where you are able to accomplish it without all the sitting and calculating what the animal soul has to say, what this resistance has to say. But again, with discretion. This doesn't mean that you just walk over everybody. This may explain, perhaps, like Chatchila Ariber also connects to Netzach. That's what Netzach is, a determination. Like we learn in the Maimer of Basi Legani, Mitzvos HaNetzachon also rooted in the highest levels. Because mitzvos HaNetzachon, the determination, the absolute commitment that we must succeed. So, of course, this means in Acharei Kedoshim, in holy matters and good things that you take on, a certain persistence that drives through and does not consider obstacles in the way. I remember when I was a child, that left me such an impression. It was Tov Chof Zayin. The year was 1966, Sukkot. And it was raining the whole Sukkot here in New York, in Crown Heights. As a child, I remember raining. We know as a Chabad, we eat in the Sukkah even when it rains. And the Rebbe, who had Farbrengens then, in the Sukkah near 770, had a Farbrengen the second day of Sukkot and Shabbos Chol HaMoed Sukkot. And that was the custom. So though it was pouring rain, the Rebbe had a Farbrengen. I remember as a child walking into the Sukkah, I was back of the Sukkah. The Rebbe was sitting, I couldn't hear, pouring rain to the point where the schach was saturated, there was already globs. And everybody was standing there, obviously because the Rebbe was Farbrengen. The Rebbe completely oblivious. Later I heard that it came after the second Sikha when the Rebbe said the Maimer. So what Maimer did he say? V'shavte mayim b'sos. Of course it's a Sukkos Maimer, but no one didn't, it wasn't lost on anyone, the irony. V'shavte mayim b'sos, and that we draw water with joy. And the Rebbe continued Farbrengen. Well, the impression that it left on me, a little impressionable child, was, this I explained today as an adult in retrospect, the Rebbe didn't have to Farbrengen. It's not like a mitzvah to Farbrengen. There's this custom to do so. And even if you Farbrengen, you can Farbrengen inside and not drink, even water. No, but this was the minhag. It doesn't matter, rain, snow, it doesn't make a difference. We know there's a concept of rain date. To me, this epitomized the Chatchila Ariber. And it had an impact on me, actually, till this day. That things I took upon myself to do, to teach this program. I give a Wednesday night class for over 40 years. That no matter what, rain, shine. I remember even after 9/11, when there were no ways to get to Manhattan, I got there one way by another, through Midtown Tunnel, not the details. But the point is that when you take upon yourself something good, there's always going to be an excuse. This person had a cold, under the weather, over the weather, it's bad weather, it's raining, whatever there may be, never stop. Because it has that persistent power, the drop by drop. The lu'umazeh, the opposite of Chinese water torture. The story of Rabbi Akiva, how the drops of water ultimately pierce through the stone. Can imagine that power. So it's a power of Netzach, and it's a power of Acharei Kedoshim, and a power of Tiferes. So one of the lessons we learned from the Rebbe Maharash, whose birthday is today, Mazolei Gever. Of course, the Rebbe Maharash is Chassidus. The Rebbe Maharash was the first to create Hemshechim. Until the Rebbe Maharash, there were Maimorim said, individual Maimorim by the Rebbeim. There were times, many times, especially the Alter Rebbe said a discourse and then said a biur on the discourse, an explanation. Sometimes an explanation on the explanation. A second biur. But a hemshech means a series of discourses. It was the Rebbe Maharash that innovated that. Hemshech Mayim Rabim Tofresh Lamed Vov, the Hemshech V'Kocha Tofresh Lamed Zayin, Matzazu, Zeis Chanukas HaMizbeach, and others as well. Yonosi, Hemshech. The Rebbe Rashab took that to another level with the Hemshech of Samach Vov and Ayin Beis. But the idea of a Hemshech, which is interesting as well, there's a certain type of intensity and expansion of Chassidus, simply something you can even see physically, but also an understanding that means a topic is being addressed extensively over a period of weeks and months till we get the idea very clearly. And among other things, the Rebbe Maharash was, of course, unique in so many other ways. Every Rebbe has his unique power. I'll mention one more thing from the Rebbe Maharash that we know besides Lechatchila Ariber, that the Rebbe Maharash suffered greatly, personally, physically, and he indeed passed away at an early age. And yet, there was that Lechatchila Ariber approach, meaning that even though he personally had many challenges, he was able to transcend it all. Transcendence, that key word. So you have many stories and many different aspects of that teach us how we have to deal with our personal lives, even though no one can compare to Rebbe, but we all have a me'ain, a taste, and of course the lessons that we learn from the Rebbe Maharash. The Rebbe was also unique in the fact that he himself wrote the biography of the Rebbe Maharash. Sefer HaTilus Rebbe Maharash, the Rebbe himself wrote and published, which was also interesting. So there's a unique connection between the Rebbe and the Rebbe Maharash, as we see also in the many different sichos and maimorim of the Rebbe over the years. Okay, so with that, let us go now to, since we're talking about Beis Iyar, let's talk about Iyar in general. So Beis Iyar comes after the Acharei Kedoshim, which was yesterday. So we know what is the significance of Iyar. What lessons do we learn from Iyar? So Iyar has two Rosh Tevos, two acronyms. Ani Hashem Reifecha, I God am your healer. And the second is Avram Yitzchak Yaakov Rachel. So depending whether the Iyar is written with two Yuds or one Yud. Even in Hashem Reifecha, Hashem also sometimes written two Yuds, as we see in the Siddur. So what's the connection to Iyar? Ani Hashem Reifecha. So firstly, remember that in the month of Iyar, the entire month is dedicated to mitzvos. Which mitzvah? The mitzvah of counting the Omer. Counting the Omer is a healing element. Because you're counting the Omer, as we say in the Iyar Ratzon, to heal from all the toxins that affect Chesed all the way through Malchus. So in psychological terms, it means that this is a period in time of healing. Healing includes not just healing from an illness per se, healing is also character development, personality growth, which is what the Eden did as they counted down from leaving Egypt to Matan Torah, leaving Mitzrayim to Matan Torah. You go out of Mitzarim v'Gvulim. That's what it says, Kol HaMachla, Asher Samti Alecha, all the machlas, the illnesses that were placed on them in Mitzrayim, because Mitzrayim comes from the word limitations, constraints, all the things that inhibit fear, insecurity, all the things that limit us, that are ultimately a form of mental or emotional obstacles. Talk about obstacles. So the Rebbe says, Ani Hashem Reifecha, Chadchil le'osem alecha. Not only will I heal you, but I'll heal you in a way as if you never had it in the first place. So the counting of the Omer is very much a process of that type of healing that we make our effort. Then comes day 50, which is Matan Torah, where Hashem sends us His power. So we count the 49 days. So that's one connection. Another connection to Avram Yitzchak Yaakov Rachel, which is like the Talmud Raglei and Merkava, Chesed Gvura Tiferes and Malchus, that we have that power of Avram Yitzchak Yaakov and Rachel in the month of Iyar, which is invoking the four spheres, these four powers in Atzilus, as I said, Chesed Gvura Tiferes and Malchus, which means that from the Atzilus godliness, Ani Hashem, we're drawing into Reifecha, into Malchus, which brings healing and power and transforms the world of Biyah, Bri Yetzir Asiyah, our physical world, a material world that evolves from Bri Yetzir Asiyah, Asiyah Gashmis. And we're being Mamshech Ani Hashem from the levels of Atzilus. So there you have, the month of Iyar has this power. So someone asked the question, we have a teaching of Chazal that the month of Adar is good luck, Mazali gave it, or body mazal is actually the expression. Bad luck. So if possible to schedule court cases for Adar is better. Yes, because in Adar you have that particular unique energy. Chassidus teaches the month of Iyar stands for Ani Hashem Reifecha. To Chazal discuss that since it's a month of healing, that it's a good idea to schedule doctor appointments and non-emergency surgeries during this month. I've not seen that. I am trying to remember if there are any letters from the Rebbe referring to anything like that. I know there are letters that the Rebbe writes on Yeshem Refecha to people who are asking for a refuah shlema, but to actual schedule something during that time, interesting question. And again, I ask your help. If anybody has any source for that, I'd love to hear from you, and I'll share it in the next program. Okay. Being that this is also the week of Acharei Kedoshim, so let's talk about Acharei Kedoshim. So in the middle of Sefer Vayikra, parsha is Acharei Kedoshim, which are two separate chapters, but they come together many years, like this year. As the Rebbe emphasizes, the names of a chapter are indicate on the very theme of the chapter. So Acharei Mos, Acharei goes on, Acharei Meis Shnei Bnei Aaron. Then in Parsha Shmini, 2 chapters earlier, we read how after the temple was established and erected, what happened next? Nadav and Avihu, the great Nadav and Avihu, in their great passion and love, went into the Acharei Kedoshim, and they ended up being consumed by Iyar, by a strange alien foreign fire. So now, Acharei Meis Shnei Bnei Aaron, so Hashem tells Moshe, now after the death of the 2 children of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, Beis Yaveh, this is what you tell Aaron. Here is how Beis, this is how you shall enter into the Acharei Kedoshim. And gives the details of Yom Kippur and all the process that's necessary, that you want to go into the Holy of Holies, you have to know how to go in properly. Now we know Nadav Avihu are considered to be B'Krevi HaKadosh, B'Krevi. Moshe thought when Hashem said B'Krevi, those that are close to me, I will be sanctified. When God said that, he thought it meant Moshe and Aaron. But no, it ended up being Nadav and Avihu. So this came from a great level. But yet in the language of Chassidus, in a mimer called Acharei Meis, Tiferes Mem Tes from the Rebbe Maharash, son of the Rebbe Maharash, second son, there were 3 sons. He explains that by Nadav and Avihu, it came in a form of rotzeh. They had a tremendous yearning and longing. But the kavanah is that it should be, the intention should be a shuv, that great longing should come downward. Like by Rabbi Akiva, we say, Nichnas b'shalom v'yotze b'shalom. He entered into the paradis with the other 3. The other 3 had a rotzeh without a shuv. So one went mad. They had this spiritual experience. They went into the paradis, the orchard, which is a spiritual level of ecstasy, spiritual ecstasy. And what happened was, one died, like Nadav and Avihu, one went mad, and one became an apostate. Only Rabbi Akiva, Nichnas b'shalom rotzeh v'yotze b'shalom, shuv, because he entered in the proper way, which is the proper bittul, Beis Yaveh. And that's what this parsha is about. So it's not about not having these great spiritual experiences, it's about how to integrate and internalize them in our lives. Kedoshim, Kedoshim Tiyu, means to sanctify yourself. Similar theme. Not just to remain in a mundane world, not just to be a good person, a kind person, but to be a holy person. Kedoshim Tiyu, Ki Kodesh Ani. Because I, God, am Kodesh. So the Medrash says, Teras Kenim, on this pasuk says, what's the addition, Ki Kodesh Ani? Ki Yochel Kameni. You could think Kedoshim Tiyu, you're holy, Yochel Kameni, that you can be as holy as I. So we say, no, Ki Kodesh Ani. Kedushasi L'mayla M'Kedushaschem. My God's Kedusha is higher than yours. That's the simple interpretation. Comes the Baal Shem Tov and teaches. They have to read the Medrash b'nechusa, not as a question, but as a statement. Kedoshim to Yochel Kameni. You can actually be Kameni. Your Kedusha could be as holy as my Kedusha. Kav Yochel, God says. As my great sanctity, my great being removed. Kedusha means also from being above, Havdalah, removed, transcendent. Why? Ki Kedushasi l'mayla m'Kedushaschem. Ki Kedushasi l'mayla. My Kedusha l'mayla comes m'Kedushaschem, from your Kedusha below. In a way, therefore, you're actually sanctifying me. You are able to do something, so to speak, Kav Yochel, that sanctifies that which is above. So it's a whole new interpretation, which isn't a contradiction to the first interpretation, because the first interpretation, obviously God is greater than we are. But that God that's greater, gave us the power to sanctify Him. That's the partnership we have. That's why the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem is such a powerful mitzvah. And the opposite, of course, is such a horrible, because when you are Mekadosh Shem Shamayim, especially in public, that remains forever. People say, this is a God I want to have a connection with. When someone, God forbid, desecrates God's name in public, Chil Hashem, then you close them off because they don't want to have a connection with this. You don't know the long-term implications and consequences of that. So Acharei Meis Kedoshim come together because they're both the central theme of the power that we have to sanctify ourselves. So when the Kohen Gadol, the holiest of all people, on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of all days of the year, in the holiest, goes into the Kodesh Kedoshim, the holiest place on earth, each one of us has that same capacity. As the Rebbe explains, we say the Iyar on Yom Kippur. The Iyar that we should have the same capacity like that Kohen Gadol. So just like the Kohen Gadol goes in and his blessings, his prayers are answered, so should our prayers be answered. Like the Rambam Paskins, the end of Hilchah Shemitah V'Yevel, what does he say? Lo shevet Levi Bilvad, not just the tribe of Levi, but Kol Ish V'ish Meboy Elam, every human being on earth that separates himself from the material world and dedicates himself to godliness. Harizeh Miskadosh Kedosh Kedoshim. He sanctifies himself, Kedosh Kedoshim. Like the Gemara says, that a person who learns Torah, Harizeh Kamei Kohen Gadol, higher than a Kohen Gadol, Hanichnas L'fnai L'fnim. Higher than a Kohen Gadol that goes into the Holy of Holies. So it teaches us about our ability to reach places. People ask, how high can I reach? Based on these verses, based on these statements, not the sky's the limit, beyond that. Ki Kodesh Ani. From Kodesh Ani, we're getting this power to be able to reach these highest levels. So of course is very consistent with the fact, with Beis, the message of Beis, L'chatchila Ariber. There are no limits. There's really, the impossible is indeed possible. Okay. So someone asks a question about Acharei Kedoshim. Since only neshamas in a physical body are able to do mitzvos, why do we say Acharei Kedoshim, that after someone passes away they are holy? It would make more sense to say that when someone is alive and doing Torah mitzvahs that they are holy. So this question is referring to, I guess, it's a tongue-in-cheek statement, euphemism that is used. Acharei Kedoshim, when they eulogize, when they talk about someone after they passed away, they say Acharei Kedoshim, after he's passed away, Kedoshim, suddenly a holy person. It's actually sometimes almost a sarcastic statement about someone who wasn't so holy. You're saying after he passed away. So I don't know if I have to go explain a pisgum like that, especially one I did not hear that from the Rebbe. I didn't hear it from anyone that I would consider a Torah source. It's a Yiddish joke that they say. So I don't know if that needs, we have to give it any credence and explain it. But I will say this, the actual meaning in the psukim is the exact opposite as you indicate. Kedoshim to you doesn't mean after you pass away. It means you shall be sacred here in this world. And that's the whole purpose. Kedoshim to you should be sacred in this world. And if you need to really drive the point home, it's a mitzvah on this earth. And if you, as I said, read the Ramban on the pasuk, what does he talk about? He says, what is this pasuk coming to add? We have many places in the Torah that says, be sacred. Atem tili mamlechas kainim v'gei kodesh. Shall be for me a kingdom of priests and gei kodesh, and a holy nation. And it says, v'skadashtem v'yisim kedoshim. Sanctify yourself. A number of times in Parsha Shmini and other places. Ramban adds, interesting Ramban, that this is coming to specify something specific. There's the mitzvah of being sacred. There's also a mitzvah of not using Torah in an obnoxious way. He introduces the concept of a novel b'reshus HaTorah. I'm not saying he introduces the person, but the concept that there's a novel. A novel is a manuvel. A manuvel is, you can translate many ways. The mild interpretation would be someone obnoxious, someone disgusting, despicable. But Reshus HaTorah uses Torah to dress up and to justify his behavior. It's Torah. The Torah says so. Someone behave in a very abusive way. The Torah says that person deserves punishment. Did the Torah appoint you to do it? So the Ramban says the pasuk comes to address a very particular situation. People who b'reshus HaTorah are behaving in a manuveldik way, a nevola, disgusting fashion. Everyone can interpret it as they see fit, but we find this, unfortunately, situations, whether it's people who are get refusers or others who hurt others. Kavyachol, it's all dressed up in Torah. So the Torah is telling us a specific pasuk. Mind you, this is 1,000 years ago, the Ramban. Even then he had to bavon such a thing. Imagine generations later. We're not here to emphasize negative things, but it's important to know So that tells you Kedoshim Tiyu is not after passing, it's here. It's where it's possible to be a manuvel. It's possible to behave in a despicable way. It's possible to do things that are not so sacred. So we're talking be sacred. So I don't know where that joke or that sarcasm comes from, because it's not actual pshat. The bottom line is, yes, Acharei Kedoshim is talking about neshamas begufim, to sanctify ourselves below. In addition to the fact that neshamas above, even though they also go through aliyas, elevations, but the real sanctity happens in a world where there's lack of sanctity. So yes, you have the concept neshamas shenasat to be tahirihi, all the way to the highest levels. Chassidus explains tahirihi law, but still, it's the ultimate purpose is Torah is not given to heaven. It's to sanctify this world and turn it into a dira b'tachtenim, a home for the divine. Being that we're talking about transforming this world, let's do a little follow-up about Chof, Nissan, and Moshiach. Spoke about it more detail last week, but there was a little follow-up here. What did the Rebbe mean during the famous Chof, Nissan, Sicha? The famous meaning referring to 28th of Nissan, 5751, Tov Nun Aleph, 1991, which was 32 years ago, when the Rebbe said, do whatever you can to bring Moshiach by using the lights of Tohu in the vessels of tikun. The Rebbe said, Take Eres de Tohu, aber in Kelim de tikun. What exactly are the lights of Tohu, and what can we do on a practical level in our physical world to contain those lights in the vessels of tikun? So firstly, I spoke about this specific expression back in episode 194, and discussed also on episode 227. These episodes can be found at chassidusapply.com. You can easily type in these numbers, or you can type in by a keyword and find this topic addressed more elaborately. It's just in general, you can find all the previous episodes there. They're all archived, and they're also time-stamped, which means you don't need to listen to the whole hour to get to the topic you're interested in. You just go below in the description. You'll find that there's actually each there's a breakdown of all the subjects covered, and each one has a timestamp, which means when you click on it, it goes straight to that part of the video. Okay, but I will say briefly this. And interestingly, let's connect it actually to Rebbe Maharash, Ariber. Eires de Tohu and Kelim de tikun is an expression from Kabbalah and Chassidus, where it says Tohu preceded tikun. Tohu was a world of intense energy. Expression sometimes Eires merubim. Merubim means both bekamas and echus, intensity, many, powerful energy. And the kelim mu'atim. And the kelim, the containers in Tohu, are small, negligible, fragile. And that's why it caused shviras hakelim. It caused a dissonance that ultimately create the shattering of the containers, which isn't a physical thing. Think of it like when a person is overwhelmed or in a state of shock. So it creates a type of upheaval or disruption. But it's almanas seser, which means this breakdown is almanas livnes. It's in order to be repaired in the world of tikun, and that's why it's called tikun, atzilus. Where there the eires are more otim and kelim merubim. The eires are more tamed, they're more disciplined, they're not as wild, they're not as intense, and the kelim are more expanded, more mature. So therefore the eires fit to the kelim. Think of a teacher who's brilliant and just pours on so many ideas that all the students get overwhelmed. Or a teacher who takes his words and manifests them, tailors them toward the student in a proper way, which is the key to communication and education and inspiration. That's tikun. So the Rebbe was saying, Eres merum de Tohu means that Eres de Tohu, it should be done with tremendous passion and intensity. But not in a way that's reckless, not in a way that can destroy, not in a way that will break anything and overwhelm anyone, but in kelim de tikun. So you have the intensity of Tohu, but in the expansive containers of tikun. So it also has that balance. The Ariber, like we said before, doesn't mean reckless behavior, God forbid. It means don't consider the obstacles. Go with a certain confidence, with a certain drive and persistence. Don't give up. And do it in a way that's very passionate, because that's how you succeed. But make sure it's in Kelim the Tikun, people can receive it. People can relate to it. Not in a way that overwhelms. Like it says in the Masechta Tainis, Reif Teva Ein Yechem Lekabel. That when Cheni HaMagel prayed for rain, so the rain, after a famine, the rain came down in floods, and it was flooding the fields. So you had to pray again, Reif Teva, too much rain. Rain has to come down in raindrops. Yes, intense, and water, you want to have that, but in raindrops that can be absorbed drop by drop into the ground. Okay. Combination of chesed and gvura, which maybe is also connected to Tiferes. The chesed is the flow, the gvura is the containers to make sure it's disciplined, it's properly channeled. Another question, could it be said that all the new technologies of artificial intelligence and machines and robots that can do a lot of our physical work for us is a clear sign that we are in the beginning stages of the era of Moshiach? For example, now we have Tesla cars that are driven by a computer. You just say the address you want to go to, and it does all the work driving you there, and then frees up a lot of time for the person who would have been driving. Now they could use that extra time to open a book and learn Torah. Are these kinds of technologies in the Messianic era alluded to by the prophets? Short answer is yes. When the Yeshaya Novi says, "Molad is the Es Hashem ke'mayim layam echasim," that the world will be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. So no, he doesn't talk about robots and machines and AI and technology, but now that we have technology, it becomes very clear how that can be fulfilled in a very simple way, a natural way, a scientific way, if you wish. So the answer yes, I meant, was not about the robots and machines. The answer yes is that, of course, the Messianic era will be that. Madana mitzim ka'ofra, says the Rambam, that we just concluded, a cycle of learning of the Rambam, that the world will be filled. Madana mitzim ka'ofra, we'll find delights, will be plentiful like the dust in the earth. That how plentiful. And what will we be doing? Lo yiyesa kol ha'elam el ladasas Hashem b'lvad. There no longer will be famine, no longer war, no longer distraction, no longer battle with darkness. So what do? You're busy with light. Technology definitely has freed us in so many ways from many menial labor and many menial activities, mundane, saved tremendous amount of time for the purpose that now we should use the time and the energy that we have for and indeed these technologies are also directed there. I actually spoke about this a few weeks ago when I spoke about AI, how it's the beginning of a new age, a reflection of the beginning of a new age, I should say, and similar topics that relate to what we're discussing here. And that's exactly how we should look at technology. I could say from my own work, I've seen it with my own eyes. I began with a typewriter back in the early 80s. Typewriter went to a word processor, then came fax machines, then came broadcast fax, then came, I don't know if you remember this, a bulletin board system. So it was electric bulletin board. It was like a prelude before the websites. Then came websites and internet, and then came all the other platforms that we have today. Being someone that's been working in the Rebbe Siches and Maimorim, and later spreading it and distilling it and spreading it in every possible way, these technologies have tremendously, it's not even, I can't even imagine how we'd reach people if we didn't have these platforms. So besides platforms being used for spreading Torah, it also saves tremendous amount of time that we can then use for the purpose for which we were created, instead of just for the means, which the means can now be done by machines and by technologies, and we can then use it directly for serving God and serving our mission in this world. Okay. Now let's talk about some other topics. A bunch of questions came in. Let's begin with, this is, as you know, this is a program which are committed to addressing every possible issue, even those issues that some others don't want to talk about, some things that are uncomfortable, sensitive. So here's something preferably I would not want to talk about, but If someone wrote about it, so let's address it. Because it also has a lesson to all of us. I just want to preface that when I read sometimes these things that describe a negative behavior by somebody, it's not meant to be, God forbid, Lashon Hara. First of all, we're not talking about any names. It's not meant to be just to talk about negative. It's about to learn lessons from what we should do and what we shouldn't do. And everything that happens is a lesson to all of us to be more sensitive. I mentioned before, Kedoshim to you, to be sacred, to be sacred. And that's something that the ultimate Torah is that we should be people who walk with a certain dignity, a certain majesty, knowing that we're divine agents in this world. And sometimes people do things that are the opposite of that. So that's the context which I'm going to read this following question. The brief question is, and then I'll elaborate a bit, what should our attitude be to people plastering city bikes with images of the Rebbe? Recently, someone or a group of people have been plastering large stickers about Moshiach with the Rebbe's photo on it all over the city on public and private property, including city bikes, the subways, and light poles without permission. This has sparked a debate on social media. Some people are commenting that because it's done without permission, it's an act of vandalism and Chil Hashem, and therefore it defeats the positive message of the Rebbe's teachings. Others are defending it, saying that there is vandalism all over New York City, so at least this is vandalism with a positive message, instead of the regular vandalism with foul language, as also in graffiti. They are also defending it by saying before the Rebbe accepted the Nesias, whenever he rode the train or buses, he was known for leaving stickers on the seats of the train which said La'alta L'tshuva, La'alta L'gula to spread this message. I looked for a source that the Rebbe actually did this, but could not find any. I'd like to ask Rabbi Jacobson if he heard the story of the Rebbe, and also if he could comment based on the Rebbe's teachings, if the Rebbe would find this behavior acceptable or not. Thank you. So unequivocally, this isn't a gray area at all. Unequivocally, absolutely not. Anything that is criminal, which means damaging someone else's property, altering someone else's property, that's considered illegal. Chaz v'shalom v'chaz v'shalom. On the contrary, to justify it with Kedusha is mamash the novel B'rishus HaTorah that the Ramban is talking about. Not appropriate. Even if you're going to say you can't prosecute the person for whatever reason, what does it look like? It's the concept of Maris Ayin, people seeing it, Chil Hashem. This is the way you want to advertise. Go buy advertisements. There's a way of publicizing something. As far as the story of the Rebbe, I don't know a source of it. The Rebbe stuck stickers. I have never heard it. I heard rumors of it, but I've never heard any substantiated source. The most I heard that someone said, the Rebbe once showed that he had under his lapel a Shabbos button, showed to Beryl Baumgarten or something like that, which some people think is some source of wearing pins. I don't know. But it's definitely not a directive, and even the Rebbe himself personally did it, if it could be established. But this is the derech, to go and do things like this? Absolutely not. And I can't believe that the Rebbe himself would ever, someone should even be chesed the Rebbe to do something not al pi halacha. Halacha includes dinah malchus dinah, the laws of the land. Just not a Teiredik way, period. There's nothing to say. To say because others do vandalism, might as well do vandalism with the Kedusha. I never heard such a heter altogether. Since when is that a Torah approach? To me, it's reckless behavior. It's criminal behavior, actually. It's being dressed up as that. You want to go teach people about Moshiach? Make classes. There are many ways to do it. Go online, do a program like this if you wish, other programs. There are many ways to reach people. You don't have to resort to things that are considered criminal and definitely appear as that. So I don't want to mince any words. I want to say it as it is. I think it's just simply misguided people who probably have nothing to do with themselves. I mean, we know the Rebbe's approach to Bachim, that not sitting and learning Torah all day. Where do they even find time to do such a thing? Where do part of the yeshiva say that if it's Bachim? So it's not the derech, it's not an approach. I have no doubt that the Rebbe would call in the Anhola and say that tell these Bachim to either correct their ways, pay back whatever they did wrong, or not pack the peklach and go back to wherever they came from. This is what the Rebbe said, whenever people behaved in ways like this. And I think it's important Now, is this our crusade? Am I going to come out now? It's my job to do, since someone's asking me the question, and I have a platform, a public forum, I'm addressing this, so we should be crystal clear and understand these things. And this is not about the Moshiach, not Moshiach. And if someone pasted the same thing that was not Moshiach, or something of another sort, it's the same idea, it's the same thing, you just don't do this. This has nothing to do with what the kavanah, the intention, and the philosophy and the hashkafa of the individual. It's just methods. Talk about Eres the Tei and Kelim the Tikun. Eres the Tei and Kelim the Tikun. Yes, do things passionately, but in Kelim the Tikun. I think I was pretty clear, and enough said. Since we're already on this topic, let's talk about fire and brimstone Judaism. That to me is a oxymoron, but we mean people who present Judaism in a fire and brimstone way. Is there any legitimacy to fire and brimstone Judaism attacking and criticizing others and suggesting that we are being punished for transgressions? Hi, dear Rabbi. This may be a two-part question or merged into one. The first part would be, what is the Hasidic approach to an advertisement that's headline is a race the lace, and goes on to say that lace sheitlach is like chametz and should be burned or the like. Another ad saying in the lines of Bas Melech should not go out with a purse worn with a strap across the chest. Second question. How to approach a statement from a gadol, quote unquote, saying the reason for the recent terrorist attack that killed siblings is because women aren't covering their heads correctly and directed towards the lace sheitel and similar. I'm not great at articulating my words. If you need clarification, please email and I'll try to expound. Looking forward to your response. Thank you for your time. Well, I'm glad this is all parsha Kedoshim, because the parsha addresses all of this. Kedoshim to you. No matter what your intentions may be, you have to always think, what's going to be the reaction of someone who hears this? I'm saying this to be melamed zchus, even if the people who speak this way have good intentions. Especially if they're not necessarily good intentions, like the Samach Tzaddik writes, that there are people who are achzarim by nature. They're cruel people, but they dress it up in Torah. Another novel, Bereshus HaTorah. They're always first to punish others. So if I saw somebody who 24/7 was propagating love, unconditional love, finding schusim like Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchever and Jews, and once in their lifetime you see somewhat a subtle constructive critique, it's one thing. But when you hear certain people, that's all they have to say, and that's their main message, I think it's misguided. It's worse than misguided. It's distorting Torah, and it's creating a wrong impression, because they're, so to speak, kavyochel speak in the name of Torah. First of all, these are halachic issues that have to be addressed by rabbis. And different rabbis have different opinions. You're entitled to your opinion if it's halachic, but remember there are other communities that may have different rabbis and they go by a different opinion. So just to have that tolerance is already al pi Torah. Not everything is according to what you don't have a monopoly on halacha, on how sheitel should be worn or other things like that. Secondly, the approach, even if you have something to say, why don't you say it in an inspiring way? Why don't you say it in a way that lifts people up, inspires people in a positive way? And to use expressions that something happened, a tragedy, because of this. Who gave anyone that right? When Yeshaya said something negative about the Eden, he suffered a great consequence. Speaking on God's pupil of God's eye, Bobas Einai. Who gave such anyone that right? There's only one God. He didn't appoint anyone here to be a shefet, a judge of all the other people. Look at yourself. You want to be introspective? Even with yourself, you shouldn't be that harsh. But if you want to really look at introspection, look at yourself and fix your ways. You see something that happened that's negative. What did you do wrong? I'm not trying to point that out. I'm just saying that's what you should be looking at. And I should be looking at. Not start pointing fingers at others. So the whole approach, even if you're to find a source of the Musardika approach, which was more fire and brimstone. So now we know today there's another approach called the Chassidus approach. Some say it's the only approach today, because most people are Taneka Shenishbu, and it won't work the negative way. Even if there was a time that Musar should be said in a more harsher fashion. Even if you find, and even if you do, you have to know how it's said and the way it's said, by whom it's said. and that there shouldn't be a tinge of your own agenda and your own personal prejudices and your own personal personality, which then crosses over into the novel B'Rishus HaTorah category. Kedoshim Tiyu. And again, the litmus test, just look at the effect it has on people. Tell me which approach will work when you speak to someone. An uplifting, inspiring one? Or when you start telling them how much they're going to be cursed and punished, God forbid, and due to their transgressions. Okay. Let us address a few, somewhat of a follow-up, talk about neshamas. I was talking about souls in previous weeks. Well, we always talk about souls, but specifically, so someone asked the question, what is the definition of a soul and what is the definition of a Jewish soul? And maybe it's a good segue as well, because let's, instead of concluding on a negative note, we'll conclude on a positive note. Rabbi Jacobson, could you please provide a definition of a soul? And while you're at it, to explain also definition of a Jewish soul. Not in the sense of who is a Jew, halachic sense, and not in the familiar nationalistic, ethnic, and ideological or religious senses. How would Chassidus categorize a soul? And the same thing with a Jewish soul. I think I once saw somewhere that the Chassidic definition of the Jewish people is soul-based. I would appreciate the light you can shed on what meaning should be assigned to the other word, to the word Jewish in the vernacular. Thank you. Okay. It's a good question because the word neshama, soul, is used so much. So let's begin with the Torah itself. First time neshama is used, Vayipach ba'apav nishmas chayim. God took Vayikach Hashem lekim ofer min ha'adama. He took earth from the ground and he shaped it to a human body. And then Vayipach ba'apav. He blew into it. He breathed into it, into its nostrils. Nishmas chayim, soul of life, which is why neshama comes from the same word as neshima, breath, the breath of God. So essentially a soul is the breath of God, a divine breath, that's unique to a human being, because it doesn't say that on animals or on plants or on birds or on fish or on the celestial bodies of the sun, the moon, even though God created them all and also infused them with divine energy, obviously, especially as the Alter Rebbe explains in Shai Yichud V'Amunah, that everything is sustained all the time simply by the divine word. But here's the breath, as the Alter Rebbe brings from Iyar, chapter 2 in Tanya, Vayipach meteiche nofach, that when you blow with intensity, it's more than just speaking. So Dvar Hashem, Shemayim Nasu, the heavens were made with words. Asada Maimoris Nivra Elam, with the 10 statements God spoke. That was speech. Speech is also breath, but not an intense breath. Vayipach means you're blowing from within, meteiche yusei, primi yusei, from within, which means there's a unique divine power within each one, and he explains in Tanya, that's like a child. A child is not like a student. A student is a recipient of the intelligence and the wisdom of their teacher. A child is a piece of their parent, the very DNA, the very genetic material. So it's much more coming from the very essence of the divine. That a human being is not just a divine creation, it's a divine entity. And that's why a human being has free will and has the power to transform the world around us. So soul essentially is God's breath. Another way to put it, I explained it in Torah Meaning for Life in the first chapter, Soul and Body, Body and Soul. Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam. The soul of man is the flame of God. So now flame is used, flame, like a flame. So the soul is like a flame. Example I often use for it is, think of an author who authors a book. So every word, every phrase is an expression of the author. The human being, the soul, is God's, essentially his expression. Now again, all of existence is expression, is his art, is his book. But a soul is his particular, his child, meaning a neshama that has the power, a divine power, to fulfill the purpose of creation. So think of a musical note. That's every soul is God's musical note, playing God's music. So when we live up to our purpose, we're living up and channeling, and being aligned and channeling the divine purpose in all of existence. So neshama carries that purpose. Each soul has a piece of that purpose, and in general, the entire purpose of why we were created. That's what the body is the vehicle. Like the rest of the world is the platform. But who carries the DNA? Who carries let's call it the instructions of the cosmic creator? That's the soul. Comes to a Jewish soul, so he explains in Tanya, something unique about a Jewish soul. But that I'll leave for the next program. I'll do a follow-up, because the big question is, Adam and Chava, for Adam and Eve are the parents and ancestors of all human beings. And Vayipur Ba'apav Nishmas Chaim says on Adam, on the first human being, so therefore by extension, all the children and descendants of Adam, including non-Jews. So why is Alter Rebbe bringing tiny that it's specifically Jews? So we'll talk about that in the next program. And with this we'll conclude with Kedoshim Tiyu, Acharei Kedoshim, and that's what's unique. We need to sanctify ourselves, sanctify our actions, and everything you do, always think, are you fulfilling what God wants you to do in this world? Are you having an impact on others that they see you, they see and say, how you behave, that wants me to love God, that wants me to behave as well in that same fashion. Adug Mechaya. This has been My Life Chassidus Applied, episode 446. We're here every Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m. Everyone have a very good Chodesh Iyar, a sanctified Chodesh Iyar, and healing Chodesh Iyar, and a Simchatika Chodesh Iyar, the way Simcha can be done in this month, and ultimately coming from Iyar straight into the Gula HaMitis Vashlema. Be well and have a good week.
This program is brought to you by My Life, Chassidus Applied. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at chassidusapply.com/donate.